there is a readiness from the both executive and parliamentary branches of Ukrainian power to work on those issues.
Let's not fool ourselves. We have to understand that decisions to start accession negotiations will be a political one.
Promises to implement association agreement are more than realistic, and they will become a perfect base on a key implementation plan next year.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. I'm your host, Maria Romanenko. More than 90% of Ukrainians want the country to join the European Union. Surveys show an almost twofold increase in support of the membership among the population since 2014. So it is safe to assume that Russia's armed aggression in Ukraine has pushed many Ukrainians toward the support of EU accession. But is Ukraine ready for European Union membership? Carry on watching to find out and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze is a Ukrainian MP and chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Integration of Ukraine to the EU. As a member of the parliament, she knows exactly what work Ukraine needs to do to secure that membership. Let's take a look.
Along with absolutely historic decision of the European Council to grant Ukraine candidate status for EU membership, we as a country also received a set of 7 conditions that have to be fulfilled in order for us to be able to start the negotiations on the accession process. And those conditions are different in their scope, in the areas that they are covering, and also even in the precision with which they are written out in the decision of the European Council. Some of them depend exclusively on the work of the executive and require prompt action from their side. And that includes, for example, the speedy appointment of the head of the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office or the start of the new competition for selection of the head of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, while others require a more wide work that engages both the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine and also the Parliament of Ukraine, as new pieces of legislation have to be worked on and passed in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. And those include the new law on media regulation, the new law on national minorities, the laws, a set of laws basically, that would fulfill all the FATF requirements for Ukraine. Also, possible changes to the law on de-oligarchization when we will receive the comment on that particular law from the Venice Commission, and also requires additional work on the law enforcement system in Ukraine. So from my perspective, that means that we have to be very attentive to different nuances that have to be put and included in this particular legislative acts. I think all of these tasks are possible to fulfill, and there is a readiness from the both executive and parliamentary branches of Ukrainian power to work on those issues and to deliver upon them as soon as possible. We have at this point 92% of the Ukrainian society supporting Ukraine's accession to the EU. So this wide societal support should also ensure that additional control mechanisms and additional oversight is practiced in Ukraine so that our way to EU membership would not be accompanied by engagement in capping and in declarations exclusively, but would focus on important pieces of legislation, important changes in our procedures, and important building of the strong and capable structures in the country, so that we would come to the EU as a strong and valuable member that would only strengthen the whole European community.
So, 7 conditions that Ukraine needs to fulfill to start the negotiation process with the EU, and Ukraine wants to fulfill them by the end of this year? Sounds ambitious. But panic not, says the former head of the governmental office on European integration and NATO, Nataliya Forsyuk. She claims that Ukraine is already 65% ready for the implementation of the association agreement.
We have already now in the Parliament registered 3 draft laws, one of them on media. The other one is on national minorities, so-called national communities. And the third one is one on selection procedure of constitutional court judges. All 3 of them are extremely important and directly connected to the recommendations of the European Commission. And the draft laws, as for now, were already translated into English and sent to the Commission in order to receive the opinion. We are going to study this opinion very thoroughly and take all the recommendations from the conclusions that will be made before the second reading. So these laws, when they are adopted, 100% meeting the recommendations of the European Commission provided before giving us the status of a candidate country. We were quite well prepared. Even before the war, the level of implementation of association agreement was more than 60%. So taking into account that our association agreement is a quite comprehensive one, that's already a big figure. Now we are about 65%, and we have made an analysis of what have to be done to finalize the implementation, at least from the legislative point of view. So we have identified more than 100, a little bit more than 100, directives and regulations that still have to be implemented. And while doing this analysis, we understood that actually almost 80% of draft laws and secondary legislations is already developed. So the draft laws, they are not only registered, part of them, quite big part, has already gone through the first reading in the Parliament. And therefore, we are quite optimistic on the capacity of the Parliament to adopt all of these laws. And we are very optimistic on the capacity of the government to adopt secondary legislations that could be adopted before adopting the primary legislation. So for us, it's first of all, of course, showing how serious we are in the time of war, which we already demonstrated by filling out the questionnaire. But it's also a very good preparation exercise, because we have to run into a screening process soon, and we want to start from a very good position where we understand where we are with the key implementation. And that's why this exercise is very important for us. Also, this exercise will prepare us to be organized in administrative, organizational and structural capacity, also professional capacity to implement the acquis when negotiations start and the screening process is over. And we will be ready to work even harder than other countries on acquis implementation, because we are already going through this exercise now, and our motivation is obviously very high. So I think that really promises to implement association agreement are more than realistic, and they will become a perfect base on acquis implementation plan next year when negotiations start, as we hope.
A less promising prognosis is given by the co-founder and co-editor of the European Pravda publication, Sergiy Sydorenko. According to him, even if Ukraine does fulfill everything that is asked of it on time, the endgame can still be far ahead.
What is very important in this decision, first by European Commission, they proposed kind of recommendations for member states, and then decision of the Council of the EU, so member states themselves. In these decisions, there was nothing indicating that fulfillment of all the 7 criteria makes automatic granting for Ukraine status, or let's say, or a decision to start accession negotiations. So, going forward with reform, Ukraine have to understand that it does not mean that when we are done with these 7 steps or 7, let's say, indicators, negotiations are started. It can happen that, first of all, the EU member states or the EU itself can consider that in some reforms they need to see more, and they can add something. They can widen a range of criteria or demands for Ukraine that are needed to be fulfilled to start negotiations. Let's not fool ourselves. We have to understand that decisions to start accession negotiations would be a political one. It would be a political one on the side of the EU member states. And the same way as they have finally decided to grant Ukraine candidate status, even if 2 weeks before that decision, not everyone in the EU was happy with that, the same way we can possibly achieve a situation when EU member states and capitals will be so much inspired by reforms that even having those criteria not fully fulfilled, they can go forward. And quite the contrary, it can happen that even if our government would insist that we have done everything, EU member states can say that not everything is done, just to hinder, to slow down Ukrainian pace towards the EU. For Ukraine, it is important to go forward, not taking like deadlines that we have to do everything by the end of this year, and then we have to calm down. No, this work have to continue despite we have some kind of recognition of our progress by the end of the year, or if this recognition would come a bit later.
The work will continue, and we continue to work for you. You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russia-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Glory to Ukraine!